in progress. So thank you very much, everyone, for joining us for this webinar. We try to invest in the next hour, sharing our knowledge, having a very productive discussion with you guys, answering questions, all related to Agile Transformation. On behalf of the Cyprus Agile and Innovation community, thank you all very much for joining. I would like to proceed now with the introductions. Dee, please share a few things about you, introduce yourself.
Sure,
Thank you very much for being here and honoring us, let's say, by joining this webinar.
Oh, it is an absolute pleasure to be here. Thank you for inviting me. Hello all, my name is Dee Rhoda, and I am a principal consultant at Scrum Inc. Scrum Inc. was founded by Dr. Jeff Sutherland. You may know him. Some of you may know Dr. Jeff Sutherland. Anyway, I have the pleasure to work with Dr. Sutherland, and I have the pleasure to do Agile Transformations with Scrum Inc. I've been doing Agile Transformation since 2011, I would say. My focus has been on Agile Transformations entirely since 2016. I'm involved in Agile Transformations, large and small. I've worked with a company of 50 people, and one of my current clients is a global manufacturing organization in a multiple-year Agile Transformation. And I am happy to share some of my stories and experiences with you, but even more excited to answer questions that you all have come here with. So that's me. Connie?
Thank you very much, Dee. So my name is Konstantinos. I'm part of the Cyprus Agile and Innovation community. And personally, I joined the Scrum Inc family back in 2018 as a Scrum at Scale practitioner in a very good training back in Venice with, I'm missing the name of our colleague. He wrote the book Scrum in Hardware.
Joe Justice or Paolo.
Yeah, and I had the luck to work and collaborate, let's say, and get trained and mentored by Dr. Jeff in Amsterdam about a couple of years ago, that I joined officially the Scrum family as a trainer. And I'm able now to deliver and certify people in Scrum and Scrum at Scale as well. I have, of course, less experience than Dee. I joined some Agile Transformations, and I already worked with Dee in one of the transformations that we did last year. And we co-trained with Jeff some courses as well. But mainly my experience is coming in Greece, UK, Germany, and in Cyprus, doing some Agile Transformations as well. And I will also be happy to share my experience, and also happier, as Dee said, to answer any questions that we all may have.
Yeah.
So with this, let me admit another friend joining, George.
George.
Yep. Hi, George.
Hi, guys.
Hi, George.
Hey,
Welcome.
Thanks for the camera.
Yeah. With George, we worked together in one of the transformations that we did at George's company. George now is coming from Microsoft. So yeah, that was one of the cases that we did. Now,
hello, right.
So let's kick off this webinar by starting from Dee, and then I will add also into what will be shared, to share some useful insights from our experience, let's say, from the field that we had till today. So we initiate these discussions and trigger some questions, maybe. Dee?
Yeah, I'd like to start by answering a question that was given to us by somebody in this group before we got here today. Connie had sent out a request for any questions that we wanted to discuss. And one of them was, what are the 3 ingredients to an Agile transformation? And I love that question, because it's how do we start? How do we start an Agile transformation? And for me, we start with answering a question around why. Why is a company coming to us? Why is a business unit or an organization wanting to do something different? What problem do they have? What desire do they have that they want solved, that they believe working differently will do it for them, will solve that problem, solve that desire for them? So working with leadership the first thing you're going to do is get them to answer why, and making sure it's a very strong why. It's not, well, we want to do this because Agile, they're doing Agile everywhere else. That's not a good reason to start an Agile transformation. Usually you will hear businesses say, we want to start an Agile transformation because we're slow to market, or our quality is poor, or our employees are disengaged. These are all very good reasons to start an Agile transformation. So work with leadership to find out why. That's the first ingredient. The second ingredient is to get a shared knowledge and understanding about what the Agile philosophy is and what the Scrum framework is doing in executing that Agile philosophy. Leadership needs to have a shared understanding of what is Agile, what is Scrum, so that they can make informed consent and commitment to doing this Agile transformation. Because if you don't have leadership with a shared understanding and knowledge of what Agile and Scrum are, and a commitment to start and to lead this change, your Agile transformation will not succeed. It will be painful. The third ingredient, and what might be, in my opinion, the most important ingredient, is understanding and having a plan for change management and culture change in your organization. Your Agile transformation is going to be change management, a change in culture. It's going to need a change in structure. So having that plan up front as you begin your Agile transformation is very, very important. Those are the three ingredients: a strong why, shared understanding and commitment, and a plan for change management and culture change. I'm going to pause. Questions or comments?
Feel free, everyone, to drop your questions.
I would have. No. It's. I'm just trying to break the ice here.
Yeah.
So, yeah, we have dealt with such a case in the past in the startup I used to work in. Getting the buy-in from the management and let them see the true value in the Agile transformation was, I think, the hardest part of cultivating the Scrum culture and the Agile mentality in the whole company. Because when you do an introductory session to the C-level and you let them know of what we will change, and this is something that Konstantinos was telling me, and I think there is also a meme for that. So there is a guy who asks who likes change, and everyone raises their hands, and then who likes to change, and he says no hands in the air. So everyone agrees in the C-level until they have to deal with some hard facts during the Agile transformation. And this is something that, in the meantime, you have to keep them engaged and let them see the vision. Don't let them lose the vision. And sometimes when you have to persuade someone in the C-level to set a proper vision to follow in order to have the perspective outcomes, and on those outcomes you can build on and create your epics and your stories. It's much more difficult for someone in the C-level to create such a vision, not just a vision for the marketing campaign, but an actual vision. This is the hardest part, the beginning, eventually.
Yeah. And that's why I always want to start with the why. So if we can focus on why the organization wants to change, then we can create those opportunities to find that vision, George. And then we can continue that vision, and that vision becomes a strategic vision of the entire organization for change. And we can build roadmaps and backlog from that, staying focused. That strategic vision becomes like the North Star for the entire organization to remind them why we're doing what we're doing. And buy-in is critical. That's why we start with the why. And we understand that as a part of the buy-in, we need to have a plan for change management so that we can get that. And I love Kotter's 8 stages of change management. Are you familiar with Kotter?
Yep.
Yeah, create that sense of urgency, build that coalition, get that army of volunteers going, right? Just follow Kotter's 8 stages and you're going to get there. Thanks for breaking the ice too, George. I appreciate that.
Thank you.
Thank you very much, George. I would like to add something on that. From my experience, it's like, apart from understanding and digesting, let's say, or realizing the whys, to actually make sure that whatever is being agreed, I would say, or discussed with the C-level management, to make sure we have frequent follow-ups and be transparent to what exactly is going, what is the progress, and if we're going to the direction that they think or they have in their mind that we are going as such. Because usually one of the questions that we ask, that we're going to discover some red lines, that we're going to cross them with this change, and usually the response we get is like, no, I don't have any red lines, or I don't have anything to cross. I'm open to everything. Actually, this is very risky, and we need to make sure that we mitigate that risk by frequent follow-ups and being transparent, and implementing and showing the progress by setting proper goals towards this journey that we're doing, actually. So this is another thing. Yeah.
Can I build on that, Connie? Because
Yes.
that's very, very important, is those frequent touch points with the executives, with leadership. So when we talk about establishing the why and establishing that strategic vision, the continuation of that conversation is getting baseline metrics on what it is we want to see changed, and bringing those metrics to those touch point conversations to show that we're moving the needle, where the changes we are making are improving the metrics that we were measuring. Again, if it was time, we need to increase time to market. Then you baseline that metric. How fast are we getting product to market now? And then on a regular cadence, you measure whether or not you're being successful with the changes that you're implementing in your organization.
Yeah, and another important thing, if you allow me to add on that as well,
Yeah.
I'm sure there are a lot of things that will be added on top of everything.
Exactly.
Is to set such OKRs that will be realistic. Of course, you can set some stretch goals and try to reach them as well and make the extra mile, but the majority should be, let's say, the scoring should be will be set in such a way that will be feasible to achieve them. And from my experience, and also from working with you, Dee, is actually the first goals should always be focused on the people to achieve this change management, to make it succeed. Otherwise, whatever goal you're going to put, if you don't manage the change, you won't be able to achieve them. So this is very, very important, which is the third element that you mentioned. That's why I'm throwing on the table the HR, the transformation of the HRMB, and the participation of the people operations, I would call it, to assist by joining the Agile practice and making this happen, actually.
Absolutely, Connie. I think that you cannot do change management without including human resources, people, operations. But you mentioned OKRs, and I want to make sure everybody here knows what OKRs are: objectives and key results. So this is a way we can work with, and this is a very popular way. This is a leading practice actually right now. And it's been around forever. Measure by Doer. If anybody remembers that book, that's been around. OKRs can help you have conversations with the executives, with leaderships, on how are we going to measure the success of the strategic vision of the Agile transformation. So it's in addition to KPIs. OKRs help you measure the longer sort. And I want to know, is that enough information on OKRs, or how are we feeling about that? I just want to make sure that Connie mentioned OKRs, we knew what we were talking about.
I have one question.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. My question is, how agile is our Agile transformation? And what I mean, sometimes when we ping, let's say, the executives for this why, it's a long discussion, and they want from the beginning some, let's say, standard KPIs and OKRs and whatever. And the question here is, okay, they want, let's say, a more waterfall approach for this level. How we can be flexible on this? And I mean, if we go with why they need the plan from the first step, and how our transformation can be flexible. For example, how often can we change these OKRs, KPIs, and whatever? What's your opinion on this? Because I have dealt with this problem many times, no? And yeah, they ask for us a standard waterfall, project for the Agile transformation. My points.
You want to start, Connie?
I will give it to you since you started with the three elements. So yeah.
Okay, yeah. So it goes back to that conversation with leadership and having a shared understanding of what it is they are asking you to come in and do. And so if you're running into this, wait a minute, go ahead and give me an agile transformation, but give me a waterfall approach to how you're going to do it, then you need to come back to the table and sit down and talk to them about, wait a minute, your leadership. You're starting this transformation and you're starting it by understanding what it is, committing to supporting it, and modeling the behaviors for the rest of the organization, right? Because culture follows structure. An agile transformation it begins with changing the structure of the organization if they are currently waterfall. So it starts with leadership. They need to change their structure. And part of changing their structure is doing Scrum themselves, setting up the executive action team, setting up the executive meta Scrum, using Scrum at the leadership level to continue this agile transformation. So if they're still resisting you, sit down with them and remind them of why you're there, what it is you're doing, and how they've committed to being a part of the change, which means no more project management charts and Gantt charts. They have backlogs now.
Yeah, thank you. Thanks.
Yes, I would like to ask a question before I just comment on that. Are you acting as an internal, I mean, as part of the organization, or as an external?
It depends on the situation. Yeah, sometimes I'm part of the organization. Some other times I act as an internal Agile coach. And a company asks for an Agile transformation, and yeah, we start the discussion with the upper manager. We don't know if the first discussion is with the C level, but we start with the upper management and we proceed.
Accordingly. All right.
Yeah.
I must say that from my experience, is like being internal and trying to achieve such a thing, the challenge is double because you're part of the organization. So sometimes it's really difficult to achieve some things because you cannot act, let's say, from the outside. So in these cases, actually, is the line that we separate the failure from success. It's one of the reasons I want to say that companies usually try to do this by themselves. Either they're lacking the experience or they're lacking the tools, they're lacking, let's say, the means to do that. And being internal and trying to change the whole organization, it's doubling the challenge, actually. And the risk factor of failure is getting higher. So in these cases, it's advisable, let's say, from the companies to ask for help from externals to help them meet these targets. And actually, this is a boost from internal people that actually believe into that and are enthusiastic about it to achieve it together, because it's about a teamwork, partnering up internally and externally and trying to influence the rest of the organization to change.
You need to have a champion, let's say.
Yes, you need to have a champion.
Yeah. You need to have an army of champions.
Army of champions. Yeah.
Yeah, it all starts with one.
It does. It does start with one. But as soon as you've got that strategic vision and the way to implement that vision, that's when you go out and you find within the organization, you enlist your army, your volunteer army to come along with you. And I have seen the volunteers move mountains with their enthusiasm and their devotion to making real and positive change. But that goes back to not getting buy-in necessarily. not getting buy-in from the leaders or the executives or the volunteer army, but helping them to understand the change and why the change is necessary. And then they're not buying in necessarily, they are owning the change. They are a part of the change.
And we need
if I may add.
Sorry, come.
No. So I was about to say something about you actually. So once you offer your services to us, what Konstantinos did, apart from talking with everyone in a one-on-one sessions, just to empathize also with each one, because let's face it, we're not dealing with resources here. We're dealing with people, like Konstantinos said. He proposed.
I think we lost George.
I think George has frozen. Yeah.
Yeah.
You want to let him know in chat that he froze? George froze. I think I can build on what George is saying though, in that if you read the Agile Manifesto, if you look at Dr. Sutherland's Scrum Guide, it's all about the people.
George, you're frozen. We cannot hear you.
Can you guys hear me?
You're lagging, George.
Can you see me and hear me now?
You're breaking.
Am I okay now?
You're still, your audio, or pardon me, your video is frozen.
Okay.
Maybe George can try and fix the issues and then, I don't know, continue with something. So we proceed and then
Sure.
George join us back.
Yep.
Okay. So we just pause this comment of George and we come back to that. So maybe we can proceed to the second questions, or maybe we can go with what would you say are the top 3 ingredients, but the one we answered, all right?
Yep.
Let's go with the first one. If the upper management does not see the value of the Agile transformation, of getting the buy-in, what are the steps in getting the buy-in? I think we answered that more or less.
Yeah.
Is there more? Did anyone want to hear more about that or have a follow-up on that?
No?
Okay.
All right. The other question is, what are the assumptions that need to be clear to the C-level so that they can be ready to expect the unexpected? So this is the second question. I think this question is coming from George.
Yeah.
Okay, you're back with us?
Yeah, I'm here, thankfully.
So you want to continue building up your questions so we can build we can answer it?
Sure. It's almost based on what you said before about the red thin lines that we have to pressure on the C-level to face, or sometimes they will say, I don't have any red lines to cross. And this is the dangerous part. You have to make them find them, because if they find them during the process, it will be harder for them to accept. And my question to reach in the bottom of the question is, how can we sit with them and make a session with them and make them realize that there are red lines somewhere, and that they will have to sit down and think of, because at some point they will come to the surface, and when they come, they will be the first ones who must solve them before it goes to the bottom of the hierarchy.
Yeah, George, I think of your red lines that, and Connie uses this term too, as impediments.
Yeah.
Okay, and if we create Scrum at scale, and we have that executive action team, and they are committed. Remember, they need to have informed consent and commitment. If they're committed to starting this change, then they are the ones that the impediments will come to if we can't solve those impediments at the team level. And they need to agree that they're going to solve those impediments. Because you're right, the red lines are there, the impediments are there. So when those impediments are made known, they are agreeing to removing those impediments if they cannot be removed at lower levels. And one of those impediments that they may be getting at the executive action team level goes back to something Connie said, and that's having human resources or people operations at the forefront of this agile transformation. And they need to help the human resources area restructure, refactor, so that they can support the agile transformation. That would be an impediment that would come. Another impediment would be the overall structure of the organization. It could be the way compensation is delivered. That's a huge change in an agile organization that human resources can take on. We need to stop compensating individuals in an agile company, in a company using Scrum, and start compensating teams. We need to start looking at how we're hiring our individuals. Are we hiring for individual skill, or are we hiring because there's going to be a culture add to the teams? Is this somebody that the teams will accept? Okay. Those are a couple of definite red lines, impediments. And using Scrum to remove those impediments, to remove those red lines, should be a commitment that your leadership team takes.
And
Thank you.
another one thing I would like to add on this, on what George said about the red lines, is like, okay, as change agents of the organization, let's say as Scrum Masters or Agile champions, we need also to empathize the CEO or the C-level as well, because we don't really know the pain points are coming from. So we need to understand, again, the why we have these red lines. Where are they coming from? Is there something that we don't really know? Because obviously we don't have the big picture of the organization. So we need to step into the shoes of the C-level of or a key decision maker to understand where is it coming from, and actually try to show them in action, of course, by influencing them, that all these concerns that create these red lines will be addressed by this way of working. But first of all, we need to build a reference model to show the results, to influence, and make them feel more comfortable, which is part of the change management as well.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Can I ask something here, Hispanicos? Can you elaborate a bit on what you mentioned just a bit earlier on when somebody is hiring, whether we're hiring skills or hiring for a team?
Yeah. So the traditional way we hire in the United States, and I think in most other countries, is we take a look at the skills that we need for a particular job. And then we create a job description and we put it out there looking for that person that has those skills. And that is important. We do need certain expertise, we do need certain skills, but more organizations are finding that if they focus less on the expertise or the skills and more on the person and how they're going to fit and be a part of a team, that they can raise any skill deficit that there might be, but they've brought somebody into the organization that can now work on a team, because Scrum is about working in a Scrum team, not about being an individual contributor. So if you're hiring somebody to come onto a Scrum team, you need to make sure that you're hiring somebody who will be a part of a team and not be an individual contributor. Does that help?
I think the main challenge is that those companies that they want to apply Scrum, they have components. They are working with components teams. Mm-hmm. And the components teams do not fit in the Scrum framework, because we tend to have developers that are T-shaped developers, that they can do everything. The Scrum can be applied more into teams that are featured teams. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. So from my experience, I believe that the companies that are trying to transform to Agile, they have in their resources and as characteristics of developers that are more into component teams.
Mm-hmm. Dimitris, you raised 2 points there. The first one is I want to go back to Kenikos's question and tie it into what you just said. In our hiring practices, we are hiring individuals that are wanting to add skills, wanting to learn more skills to be a part of a team as well. Because we do know that we have some individuals that they're perfectly happy in writing Python code all day long, every day, and they do not want to build T-shaped skills, as you mentioned, Demetrius. They just want to stay deep in one thing. So I want to build on that with Kenikos's question. Hire people that will be part of a team and wanting and willing to learn new skills to bring to the team. The other part of your question is component versus feature. This is an age-old question since the dawn of Agile time, in my opinion. When we go into an organization, they may be set up as component teams, and they believe that that's the best way that they can implement Scrum. I'm going to want to understand why they want to stay component teams and still build Scrum teams with the T-shaped skills that you had mentioned. But I'm going to move them. I'm going to work with them. I'm going to coach them. I'm going to consult them to understand the value of changing into feature teams so that we have a team that can deliver a piece of value at the end of every sprint rather than a component that gets pushed off to another team. But it's a place to start. So if I see that they're component teams, I want to come in and understand as a coach why they're component teams and what's going to be our plan to move them from component to feature. Did that address your question, Demetrius?
Yes, thank you. I have an additional question though. If we go to an organization that they want to apply Scrum, do we transform the whole organization at once, meaning that we construct all the, I don't know, 3 or 4 Scrum teams, or we construct one Scrum team and we try to influence the rest to work with the same approach by showing the results and the benefits of Scrum?
Yeah, so I'm going to give you a recipe for how we tend to go into an organization to do an Agile transformation. Here's our recipe. First, we have that why conversation with leadership, right, that I mentioned to you. That's very valuable, and get that informed consent and commitment. Then we come in and we meet with folks from all levels within the organization. We call it a go-see. I think, Connie, is this what you did with George?
Yes.
So we call it a go-see. We come and we see for ourselves what's going on in the organization. We gather data about the culture, about the concerns, about the red lines that there might be, and we start to build a coalition of individuals that might be our Agile champions, might be our volunteer army as well. From that go-see, we work to develop a backlog of how we're going to approach the next step, which is a pilot team, Demetrius. I do not recommend ripping off the Band-Aid and having an entire organization go Agile all at once. That's just too much chaos in the system. So create a reference model, a couple of pilot teams from 1 to 3 teams, just 1 to 3 teams, put them in a pilot, teach them Scrum. And then after you've taught them Scrum, create the teams, launch the teams, which is very important. That's that people skill. And then after you launch the teams, stay with them and coach them as they learn how to use Scrum in their sprints. And we recommend you stay with them, boots on the ground, coaching them between 3 and 6 sprints at the very minimum, so that you can gather data around how they're doing and what they might want to improve. And while you're doing that, while you're coaching those teams on the pilot, you're working very specifically with the product owner to help the product owner understand product ownership and build a healthy backlog for the team. And you're working very specifically with the Scrum Master to raise the level of skills that the Scrum Master needs, which is the team coach. Okay. And then at the end of your pilot, you review the data, see if you've moved the needle on the why question that leadership gave you, and go back to leadership and say, here are the results. What do we do next? You have a conversation with leadership around what is the next wave or stage in this Agile transformation. Remember, I mentioned that global manufacturing company that I'm working with. They are doing an Agile transformation over multiple years. We're into our 3rd year with them. We've just started our 3rd year with them. And they do waves of launching teams and getting areas or business units or components or capabilities launched in Scrum. So that's the recipe. Get with leadership, do a go-see, find some pilot teams, conduct the experiment of the pilot, rinse and repeat.
Thank you.
Yeah.
I would like to add on the previous question that Panikos raised regarding the practices of recruiting by sharing one of the experiences I had with one of the companies that I work with. I partnered up with doing the transformation. We work closely with the people operations of that organization specifically, and we said, okay, let's do an experiment and change the way we recruit people. So what we did, we identified, let's say, where is the gap, where we need, let's say, to hire, and we got that team involved in the process from the very beginning. So even from the screening of the CVs, the team was involved. They were participating into that because at the end of the day, that person was about to join the team. So we wanted the team to be involved. And they conducted also the interviews, and they gave feedback whether this person they felt if it fits with them or not, if they have the skills to add them value, to give them value to take from this person. And actually it was a very good process and very productive, and increased actually the ownership and gave them motivation. And it was a win-win situation between the people operations, the team, and also for the organization as well. And it was not 100% focused on experience, but it was also focused on how this person fits to the team, the skills, and how they thought that they could benefit and also benefit back. So it covers also the T-shape. So that was one of the experiences of the experiments that we did, and it worked. And actually this now, it's a practice in this company. They continue it.
Yeah, a lot of companies are doing that, Connie, and they're actually doing interviews. The team is interviewing the candidate. My son was actually interviewed for the job he currently has by the team he would be joining, or one of the teams that he could potentially join. My only caution here is that if you are having individuals or teams interview a candidate, they need to understand from a human resources perspective the things you can and cannot do, can and cannot say in an interview. You have to help them there.
Yeah, that was an agreement that was done at the beginning. So we set some agreements on how to do this. Mm-hmm. So it was respected by everyone. It was quite successful.
That's a great story.
Yeah, it was. Any more questions on top of these questions that Dimitris and Panikos raised, or anyone else would like to, or Panikos maybe would like to? Are you covered with what you have heard?
Yes, I'm okay. It's very clear, and actually, it's a phase that we are going to get into now because we would like to hire. And to be honest, we did focus on skills, so it's good that you mentioned that, and we'll take it into account. Thank you.
Good. Yeah. I don't know what the follow up on this webinar is going to be, but Connie, Dr. Sutherland wrote. I can't remember if it was a blog or an article, but Dr. Sutherland speaks to this topic as well. So I can potentially, I'll find that and somehow get the link to you, Panikos, and anybody else who would want it.
Yeah, you can share the link and share it to everyone with email, by email.
Can I ask something, Konstantinos? First, it's just a small clarification or expansion on what Panikos just asked. Assuming that the organization doing the hiring will attract a huge number of candidates, going through interviews with teams for screening, and then for more in-depth interviews and evaluating skills and doing discussions and stuff may be infeasible. What would you recommend in such a case? And the second question would be, you talked about red lines and management that needs to get on board and understand that they have to change and they have to commit and stuff like that. We would really appreciate, if possible, based on your experiences, some of those red lines already encountered in your exercises, so we can get a solid idea of what is in store for our management. I mean, it's difficult to talk to them about change using fancy terms and staying outside the box. At some point, we really need to put our finger on actual examples of changes, and that's why I'm asking these questions. So, you.
Connie, do you want to start with? Okay, all right. So Michael, human beings biologically want to resist change. You know, larger organizations don't necessarily see a need to change. They're large organizations because they have been successful with what they've been doing. So they're not really seeing, you know, they got to be large by being successful. Now, they've instituted structures and policies around their systems, right? And they those same structures and policies that helped build them into the larger successful organizations are now the things that are holding them back. They've created, these are their red lines. And so some specific examples, I mentioned the hiring process is a specific example. Having those tough conversations, Michael, those very radical conversations with leadership, you have to have courage to do that. And a lot of times, specifically, I'm going to be very direct here. A lot of times we see that those kinds of conversations with leadership are not as successful when they are being conducted by employees of the organization. Okay? It's called the consultant's effect. I have no skin in the game. I can come into leadership as a consultant and tell them exactly what they need to hear. And I can do it as an empowered, courageous consultant, not worried about losing my job. Okay? So I have sat down in boardrooms with executives and told them what they've needed to hear. And it wasn't easy sometimes for them to hear it. And some of them actually didn't want to hear it. But then those are the organizations that are not ready for change. I cannot force anybody to change. I can give them the sense of urgency to change. I can give them data and facts and information that help them understand they need to change. But it's their choice to pick that up and accept it or leave it on the table. Does that help, Michael?
Yes, thank you very much. But I still believe that we need to I don't know, put the elephant in the room up front and make them aware of what they at some point will be expected to agree upon as early as possible. And as employees, sometimes we may have an idea and a grasp of a better idea, at least, of what we expect for this to lead to. But we need to verify these concepts by consulting with an external consultant, and then at some point put those expectations in front of the management teams. I mean, I honestly believe that this should happen as early as possible. It will be a disaster if we are 1 or 2 years into a transformation just to discover that the management was never willing to accept to cross some barriers. So, yeah.
I 100% agree with you. Early on in my work in Agile Transformations, a lot of consultants were working at the grassroots level. We were working at the team level. Teams would come to us and say, we want to do Scrum. We want to try Scrum. Come on, let us do Scrum. And we would come in I mean, back in 2011, this was very common. We would come in to an organization at the team level and coach at the team level how to implement Scrum. okay? And it would work. And it would be great. And then another team would want to do it. And then another team, and then another team at the team level. And that was all fine and well, Michael, until we got to a certain point where we were actually starting to train teams of teams. And we hit a glass ceiling because leadership didn't know what was really going on. Leadership said, yeah, you can go ahead and do that Scrum thing. Go ahead. Well, go ahead. But they didn't really understand what they were doing. And so when it butted up with what leadership was, how leadership is working in that traditional sense, that's when the teams were getting squashed. Wait a minute, teams, what are you doing? You're doing Scrum? Wait, I didn't know that that's what you were doing. I didn't know that that's what that meant. Where's my status report? Where's my Gantt chart? You mean you don't do those anymore? Well, wait a minute. I didn't agree to that as a leader. I didn't understand this Scrum thing. You can't do that. You can do Scrum if you want to, but I still need you to do all those same traditional things for me as a manager that you used to do. And that's where it all fell apart. Teams became disengaged. They lost their empowerment. One of two things would happen. Talent would leave the organization because they learned about Scrum and they only wanted to work with Scrum. So they would leave the organization and go find a place where they could continue to work with Scrum. The other thing that would happen is that employees just went back to working the way that they had been working in the past. So that was early on when we started doing Agile transformations. We learned from that, and we no longer go into an organization at the team level. You can't. That's why I started this webinar with the recipe. You have to start with leadership. You have to get them to express their why. You have to get them to give you an informed and committed consent, and they have to go first, leading the change.
The way, sorry to monopolize this conversation for other speakers as well, but it seems you are describing what I consider to be a fear of loss of control on behalf of the management. You see, they are used to control the organization, the process, whatever. You mentioned status report, Gantt charts, milestones, stuff like that. I will also throw into the mix security, segregation of duties, and stuff like access to confidential information and processes that safeguard the data, which is the highest value asset of the organization, and no team can have access to that data on its own and do whatever they want and stuff like that. So what I'm expecting to hear from you guys today is a way to sell this to the management, the transformation idea, not as a way that you really need to accept that you will lose control. No, I believe we have to sell it as you will still have control, but through some other form, so through some other structures, through Scrum, perhaps. So we will teach you how to keep the same level of control or even better, but doing this in another way so that they do not see red flags coming up in their head when they start hearing about passing control to teams or to individuals or stuff like that. So I'm really looking forward to hearing your views on how to convince management that if they also become agile, they will maintain control and actually probably, hopefully, even better control than before.
Yeah. I would say they're going to learn the right level of control, because management in Scrum is freed up from the unnecessary components of control. And Michael, yes, absolutely, there is data. There's confidentiality concerns that cannot be handed to the team, right? We don't give, inmates do not run the asylum in Scrum. We use common sense and we find the right level of control and empowerment for the team and for leadership. And we help leadership see we work with them to determine what that right level of control is within their structure, because it's going to be different in every organization and within every business unit. And we also help leadership understand that there's a shift in their leadership. They become agile leaders, and they are freed up to do other things. They are freed up to start helping these teams be higher performing teams. They are less command and control, and they are more supportive of individuals and teams in performance and becoming higher performing teams, continuously improving. Does that help, Michael? Okay, good. Connie, do you want to build on that? Oh, go ahead, George.
If I can add to that, we had this one-on-one session with the C-level, just to get the buy-in and make them realize the true value. And sometimes the hard truth is that they realize that they don't need any agile transformation, but you help them realize that. And on the other hand, I used to ask a question: how many times did you plan something and it went pretty well and nothing changed? And no one answers that. That's why I present them sometimes the cone of uncertainty, which is small blocks that you are able to see 1 or 2 sprints ahead, and you help them realize that I can plan for the immediate future, and I can see what will probably happen in the far future, but I don't have to plan for it because something will change until then.
Yep.
If they realize that, then it's much more easy to convert them, let's say.
Yeah.
It's hard verb.
Yeah. So first of all, George, yes, I have walked away from organizations that said that they wanted to do an agile transformation, but they really didn't want to do an agile transformation. So I will tell them, listen, you're not ready, or listen, you don't have a good reason why to change. So we can walk away from that. And yes, how many times have we created elaborate multiple year plans? And the plan has had to change. I believe the statistic is 52% of all traditional projects change during the project, and it can still be successful. But if they aren't willing to embrace the change and be ready for the change, they are not going to be successful. And that is what Scrum brings to the table: an ability to pivot, an ability to change and adapt to the reality of the situation you're currently in. How many of you have a Motorola smartphone?
Used to.
You know the story between an Apple iPhone and a Motorola phone, right? Motorola had a 5-year plan for their smartphone. Apple iterated on their product and put out version 1. And version 1 of an iPhone, 50% of the calls dropped, but people love that iPhone, and Apple got a lot of free feedback on how to improve their product and make changes to it and adapt to their customers' needs. Motorola didn't. They followed their 5-year plan and it fell apart. And honestly, I don't know. Well, they started back up, but 2 years ago, nobody had a Motorola smartphone. Everybody had an iPhone. Unless they were doing that other, what is that other option?
That is, about iPhone, actually, what they did different, because they're not developing something different than the other companies. They know why they exist, and they passed this message to the market.
Yes.
And this is actually is the what, is the how, and the why in the middle. So many of the companies start from the what and go to how, and then they don't know why they exist. But Apple, actually, what they did, they started from why they exist, how they do it, and what they offer. So that's the difference. It's the same thing, but on a different sequence. And regarding this about the leadership not being ready to do the agile transformation, to change, I'm going to just mention something that I read, which was funny, and it was related to COVID. So there was this question I saw in the social media. I was asking, who led my digital transformation in my company? And there were several answers, and one of the answers was COVID-19. So actually, that was the main reason that forced my company to do a digital transformation. So there is a reason, there is a need, and they couldn't do otherwise because they saw they would be out of the market in zero time. 3,600 of companies shut down in the market. It's in Standish Group report, Chaos in 2020, because they were not agile. And the companies that thrived in this new era that we're living, it's Microsoft, Amazon, Tesla. And these guys are doing Scrum, and they are doing really good.
Yeah.
And the secret actually is not to work hard, but to work smart. And Scrum helps you do that.
Connie, I keep banging on this one. So that global manufacturing organization that I'm working with, during COVID, their stock price went up 80%. During COVID, during a global pandemic, this company's stock price went up over 80%. And their reason that they state publicly is because they are using Agile and Scrum, and their Scrum teams were able to pivot quickly to the pandemic and the changes that their teams and their organization needed to make because of the pandemic. So, yeah.
All right, so time really...
I wanted to mention, I dropped something in chat, Connie. I dropped Simon Sinek's video, Start With Why.
Yeah, that's actually what I had in mind when I said that with the why.
Yeah, that's what I thought.
Yeah, I was really inspiring actually. And it helped a lot to understand why Apple is doing so well. I mean, usually if you ask someone, why Apple and not Android? Because sometimes they don't really know how to answer that. But it's what I know, what I want. So it's the why. So we have 2 minutes left, 1 minute left to conclude this webinar. It's very, very interesting. It's something that we could discuss forever and share our experience forever, because it's so complex that you can touch every point in our organization. And usually the complex things are being addressed with Scrum. So this is the way to go. So I would like Dee to thank you very, very much for your time. I would like you guys, everyone that joined us, thank you very, very much for your time. A last message from you, Dee, as a concluding last word, and then we just...
Oh, wow. The pressure is on. Okay, let me just say that I just want to build on what Connie said. If you are working in a world that is complex and complicated, okay, then Scrum is a way to approach what you're doing. And Scrum can be used in any industry. I just want to leave you, I'm gonna give a shout out to my favorite industry right now. I'm actually doing Scrum in design and construction right now. You can do Scrum in any industry that is complex and complicated. You just have to start. And again, I gave you a recipe card. I gave you the 3 ingredients, but honestly, every organization, every product is unique. You need to step in and just start trying something and inspect and adapt on it using Scrum. Thank you guys so much. I really enjoyed being here with you all.
Thank you very much, Dee. Thank you guys, thank you everyone. We're gonna just wrap up the video and just publish it on the social media and let you know about that. And also, as soon as Dee shared with me the link that Jeff is doing that speech, to share it with everyone to join regarding OKRs, I think it was, if I remember well.
No, it's I'm recalling an article or a blog that Jeff had on hiring or human resources or compensation or something like that. I'm recalling that. I want to find that and send that on.
All right. Okay. So thank you very much. Till next time. I hope you have a good time and stay safe.
Right.
It was great. Thank you, Connie. Thank you, Dee.
Thank you both.
Bye-bye.
Thank you very much.
Bye-bye.
Connie, do you want to stick around and debrief?
Yeah.
Okay.